interesting question. I don't think I'll stop acting. It is fiction, but it does take place in the city I grew up in at the time I grew up, and so you could say, you know, you could look through it and find, if you knew what my life was like back then, you could certainly find a lot of similarities, or, you know, ways that I've used things that have actually happened, but everything is, you know, recontextualized. So when something happened, when it actually happened, you know, it had certain kinds of repercussions, it had certain kinds of meanings. But when it's put into, you know, a new context, it's being used for different purposes. So you can't really consider it non-fiction or autobiographical. It's really fiction.
Okay, it's really fiction. Franco is shot together with Ian Olds. Ian was here, let me check, 2-3 years ago.
Oh,
yeah, with the documentary Fixer.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. Yeah. How did you meet him?
Yeah, so Ian is my co-director on Franco. I went to the NYU Film School, and he went to the Columbia Film School at the other side of New York. And when I was at NYU, I made a documentary about the American television show Saturday Night Live, and it's I think one of our longest running shows. It's been on for 30 or 40 years, at least, you know, comedy shows like that. And I was given access to parts of the show that had never been, you know, put on camera before. So we had all this great material, but I'd never edited a documentary before. I'd edited, you know, fictional films, but a documentary has its own, you know, difficulties when, you know, putting it together. And so he was suggested to me by one of my teachers at NYU. He had made the other documentaries and had, I think, was nominated for some Spirit Awards, and, you know, been getting a lot of acclaim for his films. Yeah. And so we started working on that, and it turned out really well. It still hasn't been released. We've sold it to a company called Oscilloscope, which was owned by Adam Yauch from the Beastie Boys, but Adam unfortunately just passed. So it will come out. It's just that, you know, that company is a little, you know, frazzled, understandably. So, so the question is about getting permission from River's brother Joaquin to make the movie and show the movie. And yes, one of the issues with the material was, you know, that it was obviously very sensitive material. I think I think the performance in My Own Private Idaho is, you know, River Phoenix's best performance, and then he died 2 years after that movie was made. So Gus went to, before we started recutting it, Gus went to Joaquin, because he's a friend of him and they've worked together, and asked him, you know, if it was okay, and got his blessing, and Joaquin was fine with it, and said, yeah, that sounds great, that sounds really cool. And then when we showed it at the Gagosian Gallery, there were actually 2 films that I made. I made this one, My Own Private River, and then I made another one that Gus originally was going to make, that we ended up calling Endless Idaho, that is a 12-hour movie that uses multiple takes and is more of a portrait of the filmmakers and the film. Mainly it's the sex scenes in My Own Private Idaho are done by actually, they're not stills, it's just the actors are frozen in place in these kind of tableaus that suggest a love scene, but you don't see any kind of movement in those scenes. And right, yeah, I've seen the dailies for all of those things, and they are all done that way. It wasn't as if he just had an actual love scene and then he, froze the image. They were all performed that way. There's a little bit more movement in some of the scenes between Keanu and the Italian actress.